If you're looking for your next great mountain bike destination that offers just about everything, put Sandpoint, Idaho at the top of your list. The Lower Basin Trail System serves up world-class riding through towering timber and across massive granite rock slabs, with trails for every rider, from technical black diamond descents to fast, flowy cross-country loops. For excellent park-style riding, head up to Schweitzer Mountain Resort with dedicated downhill trails and e-bike access to more than 24 trails. Or pedal from town to the Pine Street Woods system where the trails range from flowy to technical. When you're ready to take a break from the trails, Lake Pend Oreille is right there with camping, boating, swimming, and even stand-up paddleboarding. And after a big day outdoors, head into the town of Sandpoint, where you'll find a great selection of bars and restaurants to relax and refuel. Get all the details to plan your perfect getaway at visitsandpoint.com. The trails and the good times are waiting for you when you visit Idaho. Hey everybody, welcome to the Singletracks podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Barber, and today I'm joined by Greg Heil, our managing editor here at Singletracks. Over the years, Greg has shared stories from trails all over North America. And for 2 of those years, he was doing it all while living full-time on the road in a van. We're going to talk about what that experience was like, the incredible places he rode, the highs and lows of van life, and what ultimately led him to settle down again. Whether you've been dreaming of hitting the road yourself or you're just curious about what it takes to live that lifestyle, there's a lot to learn here. Greg, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to hit the road and live out of a van full time in the first place?
I mean, you kind of nailed it in the intro, but in one word, it's look for mountain bike trails. I have a seemingly insatiable appetite for riding and exploring new mountain bike trails. After living in the same place for 6 years or so, there's really only one way to find new trails to ride. And that was to hit the road to somewhere entirely new. Mm-hmm. But the transition to actually living in a van and doing classic van life actually came while my now wife and I were already traveling full time. So I'd been traveling internationally quite a bit before COVID, shut that down, as well as in country in my pull behind trailer. But when that got stolen, that prompted a pivot to looking at maybe a van is the next thing.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, and so for people who don't know, you lived in Salida for 6 years. And I'm curious, did you ride every single trail within some radius of Salida during that time?
There's 3, I think, trails in Chaffee County I haven't ridden that are bike legal. Maybe 4.
Wow.
They're all,
you know the number.
Well, I'm still hoping to do them at some point. They're all extremely remote, difficult to get to, and probably not very fun to ride. I would like to check them off at some point just to do them.
Yeah. There's
been a few of those where I had set out on a big expedition ride to try to make it there and had to turn around. So the few trails I've ridden or have not ridden in Chaffee County yet are not easy ones to get to for sure.
Wow. Yeah. That just speaks to your dedication to exploring and riding new trails. And yeah, I could see that if you've ridden all the ones in your area and, the ones that are left are really difficult to get to, then yeah, it's time to hit the road. Had you done extended travel like this before? I mean, you talked about some longer trips that you had been doing and sort of traveling more sort of full time, but was this something you had experience with, or was it kind of a big leap for you at the time?
So moving to full-time travel, when I kind of made that transition, that was a pretty big leap. I would say the biggest trips I'd done before that were a couple of big ones for Singletracks back in the day, or partially for Singletracks, where you were documenting trails out in California and Oregon. Mm-hmm. And I'd done a month-long trip, one that was almost 2, but then I pivoted into 4.5 years of full-time travel, which is kind of a whole different world and a whole different level of dedication.
Yeah.
And the inspiration for that is maybe maybe I'm not as creative in some ways as I think I am, because I remember reading about digital nomads and people traveling full time, and I was like, wait a second, I could do that. I don't even have to quit my job to go and do that. And I was like, why why haven't I like considered that? You know, so I was like, oh, you know, so I was like, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like a really cool way to live. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, a big part of this, I'm sure, is like the logistics of everything. And I mean, for me, that would be the most daunting part, is like figuring out, how am I going to live? Like, am I going to be comfortable? All that stuff on the road. So tell us about your van setup. What kind of vehicle were you working with, and how'd you set it up for full-time living, working, and mountain biking? Because that's a lot of stuff.
It is a lot of stuff. So we have a Dodge Ram ProMaster, which was built by DM Vans, and they are a company that's now out of Rifle, Colorado.
Okay.
I think we have the LV2 model from DM Vans, but their current model is like, they've got a newer model now, the LV3. The new model is definitely quite a bit nicer than what we purchased, but you know, it's also dramatically more expensive too.
Yeah. Is it the same vehicle, and they just like kit it out nicer or something, or like what's kind of the difference or the upgrade?
So here's what DM Vans has got going on. We chose DM Vans for a few reasons. There's no end of like van builders out there, right? Like there's a lot of choices to choose from. So, and there's lots of people doing it themselves, but we were already living on the road full time, and we decided, A, we didn't have the place to build a van. Mm-hmm. Because we were traveling, and B, like we also didn't have the skills. Like lots of people that build vans are already like pretty handy. They maybe do that for fun. Right. Have some friends that were like, that's an architect that like, you know, did interior CAD designs of like a custom build out that they did. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a writer, so yeah. So I didn't have those skills, and we did a lot of research and kind of determined that we thought DM Vans had some of the best value vans on the market. At the time, this still might be true, but they were the only van builder in the nation that had a direct relationship with a van manufacturer. So they actually sourced the vans directly from Dodge, and we also like got a discount on the base van as a result. So they source the vans directly, and then they build them. And at the time, like they had a base level build. It's like all the vans had this same basic build out, which is that LV2 build. And then at the time you could add like certain upgrades to it. You could say like, oh, I want to change this or this, but you basically get the same thing with a few options. Okay. The LV3 is like an entirely new base build. It looks entirely different on the inside, but still on that Dodge Ram ProMaster base. Okay. So for people who aren't aware, there's 3 main van bases that are used for van lifing, and a fourth that's a little bit less. But the 3 main ones are the Sprinter, Volkswagen Sprinter, Mercedes Sprinter. Sorry, yes, Mercedes Sprinter van, the Ford Transit, and the Dodge Ram ProMaster. And then there's some Nissans that are used, but that's probably like lesser than the 3. Okay. Out of the big 3, the ProMaster is kind of known as one of the more like affordable options, but like high value options. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. And yeah, so when you're setting it up, it sounds like you had pretty much like, it's kind of a standard package, but then obviously like you're into mountain biking, and you know, so what did you have to do to make it work for mountain biking? Like what accessories did you add, or how did you have that set up?
So we specifically chose this one because it has an elevated bed design, so bikes can go under the bed. Some companies don't do an elevated bed design, so that's kind of like step number 1, make sure you can fit bikes under the bed.
Oh, okay.
And once we had that, it was kind of like the garage under the bed was like empty. So it was like a blank platform to do what I wanted with. Okay. And put a pretty simple setup in. Actually ended up using this Rocky Mounts tray system. And it's like a sliding tray that I bolted to the floor and then cut to size after like determining like how far I wanted to go across the van. I didn't run it all the way. And I used that rail system, and then I put fork mounts on the rail. Okay. And I did that because then the fork mounts are movable. So depending on which bikes I'm hauling, over the years, we've had like 3 bikes in there and 2, and bikes kind of move around based on the other things in the back. I can move those mounts on the rail really easily without re-drilling into the floor. So that's kind of the system I opted for. So it is pretty cheap, easy to install, doesn't take up a lot of space. There's no end of systems. Like there's some that you'll see that are kind of like pull out trays that like roll the bikes all the way out of the van. Those are cool, but they're expensive and they also take up quite a bit of vertical room. Right. So every inch matters, especially like vertically under that.
Yeah. But I guess the big thing too is you want the van, the bikes inside the van, because I mean, for normal people, if you're not living the van life, you're just driving to a trail, you're going to use a bike rack on the back of your vehicle, but it sounds like that's not even like a consideration, right? I mean, worried about bikes getting stolen or damaged.
Yeah. I mean, theft and damage, like having them inside is ideal. But again, we're full timing on the road. So we ended up, after about a year, adding a bike rack on the back as well.
Okay.
But the rack we went with like sits high up on the door. So it swings out with the doors, which swing out of the back. So you don't have ground clearance issues. You don't have to deal with a swing hitch. And our general go-to setup for gear is we have 2 mountain bikes inside, 2 gravel bikes out in the back. They're usually covered with a bike cover. So it's like, protects it from the rain and stuff like that. Yeah. And then a paddleboard and hiking gear inside. It's kind of our setup.
Yeah. Wow. It's a lot of stuff. So what about the working side of things? Like, I guess by now most people are using like Starlink internet. I mean, is that kind of the way to go? Is that what your setup is?
That's definitely the way to go. Starlink really didn't come online, but they changed stuff in the way the system worked to make it usable for nomads right on kind of the tail end, the last few, say 6 months when we were full timing. Okay. So it would have made it way easier if we had that the entire time. That's 100% the way to go now. So we do have a Starlink setup that we do still use. I mean, that makes the system so much easier. Before that, you used a combination of like cell phone hotspots, libraries, coffee shops, like you name it. I've probably done it over the years. So,
geez, yeah, that takes a lot more planning and gets in the way of that, the classic thing that I think a lot of us imagine is, van parked on the side of like, some amazing view and, people with their laptop outside. Like, how accurate is that? Was that like kind of your everyday thing, or like, when you're actually working? And, I mean, I guess I've seen it too. Like we'd have our video calls and stuff. And like, I know you're inside the van. You're not like sitting at a picnic table usually and, just enjoying the sun. So yeah, what's that like?
Yeah. If you've never tried to work on a laptop in direct sunlight before, like that doesn't work. Like you can't see, right. You can't see the screen, Yeah. And then these people who claim to like be sitting in hammocks working, like that's terrible on like your body. Like, I mean, the stuff is just horrid. So, I mean, sometimes, working for picnic tables, but only if it's in like shade, But in our van, we have a couple of swing out lagoon tables and some benches, and we've got rotating front chairs. So we've got a system inside that works for working. And again, it's great to hang out like on the side of the mountain. It's not always the best for work, especially before we had the Starlink.
Yeah.
Lots of times when it was time to work, we'd often be commuting into town. So you might have a campsite out of town. And especially if you're like in the big mountains, cell service is really spotty. So you might often have to commute into the closest little mountain town to get any sort of service or work at a coffee shop or a library, something of that nature.
Right.
So working is tough. Like that's, it's way more fun when you're not working, and you run into all these people out there who are just on vacation or retired. I mean, there's lots of times when we were the youngest people in like some campgrounds, like in Texas or in Arizona by probably like 20, 30 years, everybody else is just retired and in their 60s. And then we're just hanging out, like doing work. So,
yeah, but they were the ones that were jealous because they're like, man, what if we had done this when we were as young as that guy? Man, that would have been awesome.
A little bit. And then also being like, we could just do this for a really long time at this rate. So
yeah, that's awesome. So obviously there is an investment involved in this, in getting the right setup and all the equipment. How much do these vans cost? Like what's kind of the price range?
So vans builds can range in price dramatically. So one example I like to use is the Winnebago Revel, which is a Winnebago build on a Sprinter base with a lift kit.
Mm-hmm. A friend of mine has one of those.
And you see them everywhere. Like I use this one because it's a really common build. And if you start looking for them and you're into the van sphere, you'll start to see them all over the place, especially at mountain bike trailheads. The lift kits and the 4x4 is popular with the outdoor crowd. Mm-hmm. But these vans are about $250,000.
Yeah.
So, and the crazy thing is you see them all over the place. We didn't go for a van that was that expensive.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were all in with ours for about $65,000, which is like a brand new van and build and all of our upgrades. But like the latest DM vans start in the 90s and go up from there depending on upgrades.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you a sense of the range.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand too, especially on those Winnebago ones, when you're talking $250,000, people basically take out a mortgage to afford them too, right? Like you can get some kind of, it's like a Class B motorhome mortgage that's different than like a car loan, I guess. And maybe that helps. That's how people can afford this.
So that gets complicated actually, as we found. If you're working with a certified builder that has gotten their builds classed as a Class B motorhome, then you'll qualify for an RV loan. But if you are not working with and that's like the big builders, that's like a Winnebago. DM Vans, I think now has their stuff class Bs. When we bought it, it wasn't yet. So if you're building your own, you're working with a small builder, you probably don't have that advantage. And then if you're financing it, you're looking at, maybe you could finance the van like on a auto loan and finance the build differently, but like you might be looking at unsecured personal loan. Like the financing's tricky. For us, it was kind of, I don't want to get into details too much, but it was a bit tricky. And it varies depending on, who you're working with and what you're doing. So,
right. Yeah.
But the interest rates, even on the RV loans, are not comparable to a mortgage, so.
Right. Yeah. Especially now compared to a few years ago. So getting back to the build, like what were some kind of must-have upgrades or clever hacks maybe that you found that made life easier on the road?
One of the things that wasn't included in the base build at the time, I think they do include it now, but was a cabin heater. And that was by far the number one best upgrade we made. It was one of the most expensive ones we added on, but our cabin heater is piped right into the gas tank. So we only have to manage one tank versus like a lot of people have like a diesel heater or propane. Ours just runs straight off the gas tank. So it's super convenient. And that just makes it like so livable in like a variety of climates and temperatures. So that is
Is it quiet?
It's pretty quiet. The heater is quiet. It has a fan that runs and it can run at different speeds depending on how hot or cold it is. So it does add a bit of noise, but is like mandatory for living.
Yeah.
Really. So,
but you don't have the engine running, I guess, right? Like, which is what you don't want to do.
No, you don't have the engine running. Definitely don't do that. The cabin heater is super efficient. Like, you don't have to worry about like, are you going to drain your gas tank? Like it's so efficient. It uses very minimal gas. And of course the straw doesn't go all the way down into the gas tank. So if you are running low on gas, it'll leave you some, but that also means it's good to like run out into the mountains with a full tank of gas, because if you're even like slightly sloshed or slightly slanted, you want to make sure that sticks in there.
Yeah. And these vans can get very cold. Like I understand, I mean, I'm used to just like camping in a tent and obviously that's going to be cold. And I always figured like, the people in the RVs and the vans, I mean, they must be warm, but it gets really cold in one of those if you don't have a heater, right?
If you don't have a heater, it can get cold. It depends on how well your van is insulated too. So lots of self builds, like they might skimp on the insulation. Like if you just have the bare metal walls, that gets really cold. I have some friends that, have built their vans at various stages. And when they didn't have insulation, like it's readily apparent. But most pro builds, like insulation is like mandatory. We've got like wood paneling in ours too, which helps as well. So it will like maintain like heat fairly well.
Okay. Another question I have is like, how did you manage your work as a writer and as an editor while you were constantly on the move? Did you have like a set work schedule every day, or did you kind of like fit it in between activities? How did you manage all that?
First rule of being a digital nomad, whether you're in a mountain town in North America or on a beach in Bali, is that the work has to get done. So I work a pretty typical schedule generally. I like to work in the mornings. I like to get up and I like to get my work done. So
yeah,
I had a pretty consistent schedule. I have created a really good like mobile work setup for myself though. I've got like a laptop stand, so I'm not like craning my neck down, external keyboard and mouse that are both really ergonomic. So it's like a really lightweight system that can plug and play in like a library in the van, and it can work really well. We covered the Starlink as well already, which is critical and definitely a game changer once that came on the scene.
Yeah. When I first think about it, I think like, oh, that's so cool. You have like all day to, ride and just be outside and do your stuff. But then, yeah, it sounds like the reality is more like a lot of us, we work during the day and then after work, we have our after work ride, but it's, it's just like on our local trails. But if you're living the van life, your after work ride is hopefully somewhere incredible. Right. And so that's kind of the payoff for that work.
That's the big difference, right? So if you're camped in the desert in Arizona, you might finish work and then literally roll out the van door onto this brand new trail you've never ridden, or one of the best trails in North America, and you're hopping from like place to place, hopefully slowly, so you can savor a little bit. But each ride essentially is like a brand new ride, a brand new experience, and you get to experience a new trail. So yeah, it's optimizing those evening times and those in-between times for as much adventure as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about like, I'm also curious about just kind of the other stuff that gets in the way of rides, whether you live in a van or you're living in a house, you still got to like eat meals. And so there's like cooking and that kind of thing. Like, are you able to save time on some of those other tasks, or are those pretty comparable to like what it would be if you were living at home?
I mean, there's definitely no yard maintenance,
No yard. That's
when you're living in a van, you have a much smaller space to clean and maintain. So, which can be really beneficial. Like, I might sweep the floor almost every night in the van and it takes me like 30 seconds, right? So, it's pretty, some of that stuff is pretty easy. There are some challenges and van specific chores that you have to stay on top of. One of them is filling fresh water and disposing of like gray water, sink water, and things in like an environmentally sustainable way. So, and then also like shopping for food. So in our setup, we can carry about like 3 to 4 days of food, most of that being fresh food in our fridge, and about the same amount of water at like one point in time. So, looking for water, filling and dumping water is like kind of a constant daily chore. If you're moving your van a lot, takes a lot of planning and preparation of plan for campsites, figure out where you're going, find camp. Setup and tear down can be pretty quick, generally speaking, but if you're moving around a lot, that adds time onto it. So it depends how fast you're moving. I really prefer to like move as slowly as possible. So, if you're really moving fast and you're on a big road trip and you're trying to get somewhere, that takes a lot of time to plan camping and find camping for sure.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, yeah. So let's talk about some of the places that you're able to visit and ride. Let's start first with like kind of the unexpected gems, like places that you visited that ended up surprising you or exceeding your expectations.
Man, there's so many unexpected gems. And that's part of the beauty of getting to travel slowly. You can stop and discover places that you might otherwise never have visited or just like skipped right over. So the most epic trip we took in the van was driving to Fairbanks, Alaska and back. That took us about 5 months door to door from Colorado. But ultimately we began that year on the Mexican border, like literally camped on the Rio Grande River, and by midsummer we're north of Fairbanks. So that's a hell of a trek, like across that distance. But through like that drive to Alaska, like we went through kind of southern BC and hit Vancouver Island and Whistler and Squamish. which we expected to be really good. And then our goal is Alaska. But in between, we found so many cool mountain bike destinations that we didn't really expect especially through northern BC and the Yukon.
Okay.
So places like Williams Lake and Burns Lake and Smithers, all kind of in northern BC, and then Carcross in the Yukon, which is kind of near Whitehorse. Some of these places were just incredible, like trails, incredible sceneries. I like to say if we did the trip north again, I'd just stop in the Yukon and not even bother going to Alaska. Like the Yukon was freaking awesome. So
yeah. Well, what was the surprise though? I mean, I would imagine that it's beautiful and amazing up there, but was it like the quality of trails that surprised you, or what was it that made it really stand out?
So you might think it's beautiful and amazing, but a lot of northern BC is actually just really flat.
Okay.
So once you get north and out of like the coast range, a lot of it is flat and treed. So for instance, you're driving for hours and hours through, what could look like Ontario maybe. But then you get to a place like Smithers and there's these like mountain ranges that just kind of pop up like out of like the surrounding like flat terrain, which you're like not really expecting at all.
Yeah.
But then, the quality of the trail and the trail building in a lot of these places, like Burns Lake as an example, is this tiny little town, but they built like this amazing network of trails with a campground at the bottom, right on a lake, like, top tier, like flow trails, like uber gnarly tech, the quality you'd expect from BC, but like hours and hours and hours from like any sort of population center.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's building that and who's riding that? Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, small local communities and who's building that? I mean, lots of professional trail building companies, but Carcross as an example is really an interesting one. So that wasn't like on our radar at all until we got into the Yukon or on our way up and we're chatting with people. I planned to go to Whitehorse, which is the capital of the Yukon, has a bunch of trails around it. But then people kept saying, oh, you got to go check out Carcross. So we didn't really have a ton of time because we're trying to get where we're going. But we like detoured south to Carcross, check it out, which is on First Nations land. And it's this incredible trail system primarily built by First Nations kids who get employed during the summer to go out and build these trails. So it's built by like the local kids. It's kind of a way to teach them a skill that they can apply, which professional trail building in the Yukon and BC, that's a pretty good skill to have. Yeah. And this trail network is like a little insane. Like it's incredible, like super steep rock slabs, like tons of like long wooden skiddies, bunch of like built features on this mountain overlooking kind of like this bay on coastal Yukon. And it's just like, it might not be a bay, it might be a river. I have to double check my map, but again, it's one of these places that I hadn't heard of, and those surprises are really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you got to be open to it. I mean, you don't have to, but you're going to have a lot more fun if you're open to being flexible and like asking people like, where should we go? Like, what's cool here? And taking that detour when the chance arises.
100%. Like, I really like to plan things. But I like to plan things and leave enough time in my plans that when you hear about something like that, you can say, hey, we'll drive south a couple hours and go check this out on our way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So on the flip side of that, were there any like really well-known spots that, you planned and you got there and then you ended up leaving early because it just wasn't as awesome as you thought it was going to be?
I'd say most of the places we left early were due to more likely difficulties in camping or weather or some other compounding factor than necessarily the trails being bad. So, for example, a lot of the best mountain biking in Alaska is actually directly adjacent to Anchorage because there's enough people to build and maintain trails there. But we found the van camping around Anchorage to be really, really tough. So we actually spent less time there than we anticipated. And then one summer, it seemed like we spent the entire summer basically just getting chased around the Western USA by wildfires and wildfire smoke.
Geez.
There's those are often the reasons we leave places early.
Yeah.
Like for instance, we went to Mount Rainier National Park and we were there for like 2 days. Like we went there to escape smoke in Bozeman and we were there for 2 days and literally a fire started like on the opposite ridge and then we got like smoked out of there. And
that's a bummer.
That sort of stuff happens quite a bit.
Yeah. It seems like too, we were hearing about it and this was probably more like early COVID times, but places, especially the more popular, well-known places, just being overcrowded. And so I was wondering about that. Like if you're like, okay, we're going to Moab and we're going to spend a week, and then you show up a place like that and you're like, we can't find anywhere to camp, or like, it's just too crowded. Was that ever an issue for you?
Last time I was in Sedona, it was pretty tough. I've been to Sedona a few times over the years, and at this point, Sedona is nutty like that. Sedona is really tough. The camping has never been very good there.
Mm-hmm.
There's not that great of camping. A lot of the Forest Service campgrounds are only open during the summer, and lots of times people are there in like the winter and early spring.
Yeah.
And there's like kind of one dispersed camping area, which gets way too crowded because it's not big enough for like the demand of Sedona. And then the way the roads form in Sedona, if you've ever been there, there's kind of like this V that comes together at this one junction.
Mm-hmm.
It could just be brutal to like drive across town. So that's the last one or two times I've been there. It's been really tough, and we haven't been back in a while. So there's a lot of great places to ride in Arizona. We've spent a lot of time in Arizona over the years, especially like wintering, and to the point where it's like, don't really need to go back, So yeah.
Lots of places to go, lots of great places out there. So yeah, with thinking about that, did living on the road give you kind of a different appreciation for trail access and mountain bike culture, seeing what it's like in different places around the country?
I think it is interesting to see different communities will have different vibes, and there's even different styles of riding.
Mm-hmm.
But like, especially like if you're in Squamish versus like Arizona, like things are very different. And like you might be in a place that's more downhill focused versus XC focused.
Right.
But it's kind of like no matter where you go, like these people are like passionate about their trails,
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see local communities making great things happen, often in the face of adversity, and challenges, whether politically or like monetarily or whatever you might have. And just seeing people like rally and have communities like around biking, and how that's like such an important part of like those communities. So I think I just always appreciate the differences and appreciate the effort that every local community puts into their trails. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too, and we'll get into, where you ended up settling down, once you were done living the van life full time. But yeah, I mean, I'm curious too, like coming from, you've lived in Salida where there's excellent trail access, but seeing other places, were there places where you're like, wow, this is even better? Like, I didn't even realize that like there's these even more accessible places that people are living and building and that sort of thing.
That's tough. I mean, you can't help but compare, different communities. I think I tried really hard not to compare too much, in the sense that like everywhere is a little bit different, and everywhere, like especially if you're looking at major mountain bike destinations, lots of places are different, and they're doing things just slightly different, or they've got something they really focus on.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, like love spending the winter in Arizona. Like spent quite a few winters in Arizona before we got the van. Like rented a condo in Tucson for like 3 months. Like so,
wow.
I spent a lot of time down there. But I would not want to live there in the summertime. So as a traveler, you get to kind of cherry pick like the best times of the year to like visit certain areas, which is very different than saying like, oh, I want to live here all year long.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is a kind of a tough balance to strike. So for instance, in Arizona, you could be like, these trails are great, like maybe 6 months of the year, but the other 6, probably not so much. Or you go up to the Pacific Northwest, and when it's dry in the summertime and the weather's, fantastic, that's great. But like, do you want to be there in the rain all winter? That's a different like decision matrix, right?
Right.
So, and then there's also places you go where you're like, these trails are amazing, but then you're like, would I really want to ride these trails like 100% of the time? Just thinking, I was just chatting with a friend who is up in North Van and Squamish, and like, for instance, North Vancouver trails are amazing, but every time you go out, it's like, this is really tough. And like one small move and that's a broken collarbone, and I was kind of like, you can admire the quality of the trails, but then ask like, would I really want to ride this stuff like 100% of the time? And maybe the answer is no, So,
yeah. Yeah. That is tough to like separate that out. I mean, I find myself thinking that too every time I go on vacation anywhere, whether it's a bike trip or I'm going to the beach, and yeah, you're there and you're like, oh my gosh, it would be amazing to live here. But then, yeah, there's reality that's a part of that. And I guess that's the advantage of being in the van, because you can hit those places kind of at the ideal time and under the ideal conditions, and then sort of move on.
Yeah, and maybe this is worth mentioning too. There are some towns that are in places that are really easy to van in and have convenient van access, and then there's others that are tough to van in and still have really good trail access. It might be better for living. So like you kind of mentioned, Anchorage doesn't have much in the way of good van camping, at least not legally, and but like has pretty great trails now. So there are some communities where the van lifing is really easy, and some places where the van lifing can be really tough, but the trails are still great. So you've got to like, there's a lot of different dynamics to like evaluate when you're talking about like how good or how bad a place is.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Well, so we've touched on this a bit, but from the outside, van life can look like it's just one long vacation, but clearly it's not that simple. So I'm curious, we've mentioned a few of the challenges, but like, what are some of the biggest challenges, I guess, that you faced living the van life?
People like to say the two main challenges of van life are and showering. But if you can come up with solutions to those two, then you're golden.
Okay.
So showering actually can be a tough one, but for showers, we had like a Planet Fitness membership, which was really affordable and really great if you're in a place with Planet Fitness, which they're not quite everywhere. So
I thought they were all over the planet. That's in the name.
But like you start talking about going to small mountain towns, and then like it's the thing with van lifing for mountain biking is you end up in all these like really remote areas that don't have necessarily great infrastructure. But even in those places, oftentimes there's like a community center, a community pool. You can pay for a day pass to like go in and get a shower.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it's kind of expensive. Other times, I mean, there'd be places like there's this one shower near St. George, Utah that we go to that I think is like $1. Like, it's just
truck stops too. Those have showers, right? You ever use one of those?
No? Those are expensive. Truck stop showers are expensive. I mean, you're talking maybe like, $15 for a shower.
Whoa.
Which our Planet Fitness membership was like $19 for a month, and you can bring in a friend for free. So we only have one of them, So yeah. So never did the truck shops.
Tricks.
Yeah. But we also have a setup in our van that works okay. We've got like our sink has like an extendable kind of spray hose, which we can pull out the window. And we've got electric heating element that we can heat our main water tank with. So we can take like hot, like outdoor showers, like fairly easily. So, so those are, you've got to find solutions to the challenges. And then once you kind of got your system down, then they're, not so tough.
Yeah. That's awesome. So thinking about those challenges as well, like, are there common mistakes maybe that people make when they're first starting out? Or maybe you have some that when you first started out, like you made mistakes. I'm curious about what those are.
Oh man, there's so many mistakes people could make, and we've probably made over the years as well. But one of the mistakes I see people making all the time, or actually here's a few of them, but one that like bothers me because I feel like they could be having such a better time is when people travel too fast. I'm a big fan of slow travel, slowing down and savoring. I like to say if, a place is worth visiting, it's worth spending at least a week there, if not longer. And when you see people like, stopping into a national park, like a massive national park, and they're there for one night and then they're to the next national park for a night, and they're doing the Mighty Five in Utah in like a week, you're just like, man, you're spending your entire time setting up and tearing down camp and driving, and you're not getting to like just sit and experience this place you're in. So I try to encourage people to slow down.
Yeah. And that's expensive too. I mean, it's practical too. It's not just like, oh, you'd have a better time. It's also like that adds up, the gas and everything to do that, right?
Exactly. I mean, you can turn van life into a really affordable way to live, but to do that, you got to move like a slower end, And then, for instance, if you post up like in Tucson or in Moab or some of these like places where it's easy to van life for like a month, you might not spend that much in gas. Like, you know, you might go through like about 2 tanks or something, you know, like in a month. Like it doesn't have to be a lot. But if you're chasing across the country, you're going to spend a lot more in gas. You just have to make those conscious decisions. For example, when we drove to Alaska, now I can't remember exactly which year it was, a few years ago, but it was like the highest ever gas prices had ever been at the time. But we had been like planning towards this trip for like over a year because it's like a really big excursion and not easy to do. And we're just like, yes, gas is really expensive right now, but we don't know if we're ever going to have this opportunity or this time like set aside where we can make this happen again. So we just went for it. So sometimes you got to do that too.
Yeah.
Other, you know, mistakes. One is sleeping at Walmart. I don't know why people do this, but they think it'd just be great to just drive around and sleep at Walmart.
Well, it's free and all your stuff's there. Yeah.
Oh, man. I just think it's like the worst thing ever. I've never slept at a Walmart yet.
You might not know what you're missing. It might be amazing. Maybe there's like campfires and s'mores. No.
No comment on the riffraff that you see at Walmart after dark.
Yeah.
You know, which could be a safety issue in some places, actually. So
yeah,
I think like a little bit of planning can go a long way to prevent you from having to do like, you know, unpleasant urban camping. So planning ahead, trying to figure out where you're going to be for the night, getting there at a reasonable time, can go a really long ways towards like making your experience a lot better.
Okay.
So yeah, not planning enough, I think can be a problem. And we talked a bit about the finances of van life, but like, financing a van you can't afford is something a lot of people do, which seems like a problem. I mean, everybody makes their own financial decisions. I choose not to do that.
And to be clear, when you did it, because you were full-time, like you didn't have a mortgage or rent or anything else, right? I mean, it was just your van.
Yeah, didn't have a mortgage, didn't have rent, end up basically more or less buying the van in cash. So like didn't even have a car payment either.
Yeah.
So we might get to this in a second, but actually we could just jump in right now.
Yeah.
But one thing we see a lot of are like, there's this classic thing that happens where people will be like living in a van full time and then they stop and they're like, all right, we're going back to house life. And the moment they do, they turn around and they sell their van. And I just have the hardest time wrapping my head around it because I'm like, you loved being a nomad. You loved traveling in this lifestyle. And now you're just like not going to do it at all. Like, how harsh of a transition is that?
Right. Unless you hated it. Unless you really were like, I'm never doing that again.
But like, let's say you did it for a year. You can't hate that much, you know?
Right.
But my theory is like, lots of people like buy vans they can't really afford, or maybe they could just barely afford the payment when they didn't have, you know, a mortgage, and then you get a mortgage and you can't afford both things. So I think there's something to be said for making sure you can afford what you buy. So
yeah. What about like your other living expenses, like housing costs aside? Do you spend more or less on the road? About the same?
I would say the housing costs are the number one thing, but then you've got to plan a bit for van upkeep and van maintenance. And again, it depends how fast you're moving. So if you're on a big road trip, you're going to have a lot higher gas expenses and some of those travel expenses. I will say when it comes to housing though, like some people, there's lots of different styles of van lifing. And some people will like say only camp in places that are just free, like, you know, dispersed camping, like out in the boonies. That's all they'll do. We would be more than willing to pay for like cheap public campgrounds, not saying like, you know, expensive like KOAs, but like, you know, Forest Service campgrounds are like $10 to $20 a night or so. Like we'd be more than happy to pay for those. So I would say we were like, in some areas of the country, if you're vanning, that might be your only choice. For instance, in Texas, there's very little public land, but there's an amazing Texas state park system. Like that's really incredible. So you're going to have to budget more for camping costs, but you're like in this park. And we would very often like pay for campgrounds because the shit might be easier. And you might have like water available as well on the nicer campgrounds, which makes filling water also easier. You might have a table. So, you know, sometimes the $20 a night feels worth it. So I like I would say like some months we might like be in a campground almost none. Other months like maybe close to the whole month. I'd say maybe like half and half. So we did have some camping expenses. I would say food, depends on like how good you are at cooking, and cooking in your van. So some people like eat out a whole lot and that adds up, but it's kind of like the same way at home, right? We cooked a lot in our van. And so it's pretty similar, comparable expenses in that sense.
Okay, cool. So you kind of touched on it, after some years on the road, living full time out of the van, you decided to settle in one place again. So what led to that decision for you?
Honestly, the reasons aren't sexy, but they're real. So, I mean, the main number one reason was both of us were dealing with different types of medical issues. And I especially needed to do many months of physical therapy to deal with some things, which is, it's one thing like, to have an appointment or like get in for an appointment when you're on the road, possible. But like, once or twice a week, physical therapy for months on end is pretty impossible. So that was the number one reason. The other one is like at some point working with both of us working in such a confined space for so long got pretty challenging. So again, it'd be way more fun if you're not working. You could just be unemployed and out there. But we were both holding down full-time jobs and doing this. So again, those aren't super sexy reasons, but that's kind of like the reality of the situation at some point,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned that you still have the van. So how do you use it now that you are settled in one place, but you still got the van?
We use the van in so many different ways. It's still like so great to have, and we really love having around. Everything from just like quick weekend trips up into the mountain, which I'm going to leave this afternoon and pop up into the mountains because the van's been in the shop for like 3 weeks. So excited to use it again. Yeah. Everything from that to we went to Arkansas for work, and we're down there for close to 3 weeks. And this winter, hoping to spend like maybe a month, maybe two in Arizona, getting out of the snow.
Yeah, nice.
So everything from weekenders, like up to like, a month or two, like still like popping out and like finding good weather somewhere. You'll also find like when you have a van, you've kind of like start finding you can use in ways to like save you quite a bit of money on lodging. So like, for instance, our countries, our families are on like the eastern side of the USA. So road trips, you don't pay for hotels anymore. If you've got a early flight out of an airport that's not in your hometown, like you can sleep in the airport parking lot instead of like paying for a hotel. So there's all these ways like it comes in handy for sure.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. And I don't think we mentioned it, but I mean, you ended up settling in Durango. Was that like a spot that you had visited while you were living van life and really liked it? Like, were you scouting and thinking about that? Like, maybe we'll settle down in one of these places one day.
So you come back to like what town is best. And I hedged a bit on that because like, I've been a Colorado resident for 12 plus years now. And it was tough to like move anywhere.
Didn't find anything better.
Basically not. Sorry. I mean, sorry to everywhere else, but like I love Colorado. So again, different town in Colorado, but Durango is super special. And again, you got to think about the entire package of what you want out of a place when you live there full time versus when you're visiting. For instance, like I love spending time in Moab. I don't quite know that I want to live there full time, but now it's only 3 hours away. So it's pretty great. However, I will say like, if Canada would ever let me in, there's a lot of places in BC I could see living. So British Columbia is an amazing place with a lot of towns that I could probably see living in. But that's great. Colorado called us back. So it's good to be here.
Yeah. Well, do you think you would ever go back to full-time travel, maybe at a different life stage or something like that? Or do you think that chapter is kind of closed?
Honestly, we talk about it like almost every week about going back. I think it might take a different life stage, most likely. Like maybe a little bit, but I have a hard time sitting in one place for too long. So even if I'm in, Durango for 2 months, I'm like, all right, like, well, what are we doing now? Like, what's the next thing? So I think, yeah, we'll most likely go back to full-time travel. But for now, like just kind of traveling in different ways. Like I said, having the van still makes it like easy to do these trips that like otherwise might take a lot more planning and prep. And while living somewhere, I'm taking advantage of different types of travel, like more international travel over the past couple of years, which has been nice to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Greg, thanks so much for sharing your story. It's been awesome following your journey. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be inspired, or at least they're going to be van curious after hearing this. So thanks.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
And thanks to everyone for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and be sure to check Singletracks for the latest trail news. Catch you on the next episode. Peace.